My name is Jeff Merrill, and I will be the moderator for today. I grew up racing sailboats, and to me, powerboats was always the dark side, unless they were the whalers who were coming to rescue me when I capsized with a committee boat who was starting the races. So there's always been powerboats in my life. Erik is up next.
I'm Erik Kunz. I'm a senior product manager with Furuno. I like being involved with TrawlerFest. I put on some seminars on troubleshooting, on maybe hands-on operation with MFDs. But I started as a kid at the Jersey Shore sailing, and I ended up going to college at Widener University, getting an engineering degree. And from there, I became somehow a field service engineer for a marine electronics company.
Pretty accomplished sailor sitting right next to you, John Clayman, who, by the way, I have John's business cards up here. You must have been presenting earlier. So be sure and stop by at the end and pick up one of these. Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah.
So, we've been friends for a long time. I'm John Clayman, and president of Seaton Yachts. We're in the business of designing, building, servicing, and selling new and used seagoing, sail, and power yachts.
Could you repeat that? Because I want to make sure I got... No, I'm sorry, I'm messing with you. Go to Steve Zimmerman.
Well, my story is I went to college at the University of Virginia with the intention to go to law school, studied my tail off for 4 years, got accepted at one of the best law schools in the country. Took that summer to go work on a sailboat as a paid hand for a beautiful boat owned by a naval architect. And we got to Maine, and we stopped in the yard where the boat had been built, and got a tour of the yard and stayed there for a few days. And I thought, this is pretty cool.
It's always very reassuring to see Chris Parker in the room, because then the weather was good enough that he arrived. So, Chris, go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Chris Parker with Marine Weather Center, and we help folks not only get to paradise safely and comfortably, but also enjoy paradise more when you're there. So I got started in boating when I was 10 years old. Dad bought a powerboat in Stone Harbor, New Jersey. And yeah, so I kind of opposite of Jeff. I started out in powerboats and then went to sail.
Okay. Rudy.
My name is Rudy Sechez. We started out, I couldn't afford to buy one, so we built our own boat. Soon we built 7 or 8. We designed and built our most current boat that we're on. We've been cruising for over 20 years, since written a book and I've taught on it. My wife, Jill.
Okay. So, Bruce, bring us home, or start us off.
Well, he gave me my boating background. Well, basically the fact, we talked a lot about the fact that Joan and I were the first circumnavigators in a powerboat. But I grew up in Seattle, Washington. I'll say about Joan and I have been together 50 years, and the first 50 are the toughest. We're here today for is to talk about boating and to talk about you guys. And I know that most of you own boats. Just for reassurance, raise your hands, all the boat owners. All right, so the majority of your boat owners, we're not looking at a bunch of people that arrived here today to ask us whether they wanted a sailboat or a powerboat. You're all powerboat oriented, I take it. So I want to find out what you've been thinking about, hopefully, that can stuff this panel, because they can answer just about any kind of a question you have. Who's got the first question?
I'm looking for some counterpoint to the madness of our last session, where we learned that unless we foreign flag our boats, we'll be actively tracked by maritime states and persecuted and fined tens of thousands of dollars every year.
That's not true. Can you want to answer?
I'll start, yes, and I asterisk, not a lawyer, but I think there are some things you need to think about when you're cruising. We had a conversation about this at lunch by someone else who was in that class, and the fun part, of course, is getting the boat going out cruising, but there are other consequences with reality and those ties to the mainland that can come to get you. So typically when you buy a boat, you are paying sales tax or figuring out a way to legally leave that state to go to another state so that you don't have to pay it. But if you don't pay sales tax somewhere, you're always going to be looking over your shoulder. When you stay in residence in a certain state for, I used to think it was longer than 30 days, I was corrected today, lunch 90 days, you have to be thinking about it's time to go, because they will get you not for sales tax necessarily, but for use tax. You're using their waters. So Todd Lochner, was he? Yeah, so Todd knows this stuff. He knows this stuff, and it's very important to be aware of this, because that is an important consideration. They I wish that one of these attorneys would put the list up there that Maryland it's 45 days, in New York it's 30 days, but it's much more complicated than that, because if you have a business in New York, let's say, and you're in New York, even though you bought the boat in Florida, you live in Connecticut now, they call that a nexus, and they can come after you for taxes in New York. Again, not an attorney, this is my understanding on it, but it is something you do need to be aware of. And just like we have surveyors and brokers and weather people, we also have marine attorneys who specialize in that. We probably should get a marine attorney on our panel. Any marine attorneys in the audience want to come forward? I wouldn't admit it either. We're out of seats is what I meant to say. So I don't think I really answered it, but it is something that you need to be thinking about. John, you had something you wanted to add to that.
So we work worldwide. So we get involved in all kinds of jurisdictions. And sometimes, like every transaction we do in California, we always make sure that maritime attorney is involved, because that state is so complicated. And there are ways.
Very complicated.
It is very complicated. I would say 95% of our East Coast sales are Rhode Island sales, even if the boat never gets to Rhode Island, because Rhode Island is tax-free. Very often, a lot of our sales are in, the boat is physically in Florida, and we're licensed and bond to do business there and registered there. So we can, normally you have to get out in 10 days, but like Jeff said, if you go into a yard that's recognized by the state and you file the proper paperwork, that's free time. We're able to provide an additional 90-day sticker so you can stay in, and we can get you a 180-day sticker, which costs about $450. But once you're out and don't come back in for a year, then you're only free, as far as I understand. But I always issue this.
But that's in Florida.
The business of
getting
tax legal advice. That's how most of it works.
If you do,
every state is different.
Yeah, if you do what John says, you do pay tax in Florida. It's capped out at $18,000, which seems like a lot, but percentage-wise, that's pretty small, and that will then make you clear in the state of Florida. But if you're in New Jersey, I don't know what the tax rules are, and they're using their waters, using their facilities for a long time, they may want to hit you up for sales tax there. So there's sales tax, there's use tax, there's property tax, there's a lot of different taxes, in addition to income tax and everything else. So something to be aware of. I don't think we should go into a lot more detail without a legal expert here. Does that help a little bit, maybe? Muddy the water a little bit more?
Oregon, Alaska, tax.
Oregon is a tax-free state. But again, if you buy the boat in Delaware, if you buy the boat in Oregon or Delaware or Rhode Island, and you find yourself in Connecticut, and Connecticut has a use tax, then you could be potentially at risk in Connecticut. That's the game. That's the game.
How long you been in?
Well, you know what? We've got these things, facial scanners on our phones now, and AIS on our boats. It's amazing how they can track you and how you can track where other boats are. Very real concern. Very important thing to talk about. And I don't know if we can really answer it correctly for you, but it's a caveat emptor, buyer beware type of situation. So we are officially starting. If you don't have a set of handouts up here, please feel free to get them. But this is a series of slides that I have. I grew up racing sailboats, as I mentioned, and anybody else race sailboats? So one of the things that I found was really helpful as a sailor is setting up my sailboat so that I could repeat certain settings. You know, you're trimming with lines, you're adjusting sails, and when you're sailing on a start line. Typically, your sails are in, and then you go up around the weather mark, and then you let your sails out. And you get to the bottom mark, you pull your sails back in, and the settings that you had at the weather mark are probably what you want to be when you start going back upwind again. So I would take a black ink Sharpie pen, and I would mark a little band around my main sheet line so that when that black band came by the cleat, I knew that was about the right setting, or it was 2 inches. Anyway, there was a reference that I had to know how to reset up. And that's how I went about sailing. I would have tacking angles, so I knew in certain wind conditions, if I tack now, this would be my heading, and I could make the mark, or I wouldn't lay it. And there's a lot of things you can do on sailboats to dial them in. As I went from being a sailboat builder and broker to a powerboat guy, I got to wondering if there was a similar type of thing you could do with trawlers to dial them in. And the very first thing I saw on a trawler that caught my attention was an engine panel with some little triangles where the coolant, when it got to 185, which was the normal setting, there was a little red triangle there. So if the needle lined up with that triangle, you knew that was a proper setting. And I thought, oh, that's a great idea. And you can do it for the oil pressure and the voltage, etc. So then I started looking, and I always kept my camera with me. And I started putting together this collection of ideas of things to share at TrawlerFest with other trawler owners. Now, it doesn't matter what type of trawler you have or want to have. A lot of these ideas will cross-reference around. And the very first time I gave the course, Tim Queenie, who's the publisher of Ocean Navigator magazine, asked me if I'd write an article about dialing in your trawler. So I thought, well, that's kind of fun. And I get paid to write an article. I'd written a lot of articles for the Nordhappen website where I work, never been paid. And so I wrote this article, got paid. He said, hey, that actually came out pretty good. Would you write another one? I said, well, I've written the article. You wanted me to write an article on dialing in your trawler. Now there are, I think, 22 different articles I've written about dialing in your trawler. It's become an obsession. There's a lot of different things. And one of the handouts you have is a list of all those articles, which I have posted on my website. I do like to tell people in the morning, I am a yacht broker. I look at this from the perspective of your boat. You want to be able to operate it properly. That's why you're here. But someday you'll want to sell that boat. And part of my perspective is not necessarily that I want to have the listing, although I do. I shouldn't say that. It's not supposed to be a commercial. I want you to be thinking about operating your boat where you're safe and comfortable, and also realize at some point you're going to sell it. And if you have everything dialed in from the beginning, it's easier for someone to buy it because they see that you've taken care of it. If you have one takeaway from today, it's have a good maintenance log. Has anybody taken this class before? Gosh, I was always hoping somebody actually went offshore and came back. So I'm not sure if this is a good situation to get started with. But thanks for joining us. This is the last seminar of TrawlerFest. This is a long one, so we're going to take a break. If you think we need a break before I have one scheduled, I get it. Just kind of wave your hand and let me know. I can talk for a long time, and that's what I like doing, but I also want you guys to get something out of this. Peter Swanson, who you've seen around here from Passage Maker, invited me back in February to come over to Jacksonville, Florida, and film an episode for Boaters University, which is an AIM Media internet instructional video series. So I have done a class that's called Offshore Cruising, Preparing Craft and Crew. It's an online, it's a pay program. But a lot of this information is there, so this is sort of the short version of it. If you can't get enough of me, which I imagine is probably not the case, but you can also sign up for that Boaters University course. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. So I'm with Donna, who helps coordinate the whole thing here. We're at the dock entry where people sign up. It's Saturday, almost done.
TrawlerFest 2019, Baltimore. Great time.
And when is the next one?
Stewart.
Oh, you happen to have a handy information
guide?
March
3rd to the 7th. See you there.
So we'll be there. We'll sign off now. We've had a great time at TrawlerFest. Thanks for everything.
You got it.
All right. Yay. Hi, Trawler fans. Thank you for watching the JMYS YouTube video channel. I'm fortunate to be offshore again. If you'd like to subscribe to this channel, you can click the button below. We also like to publish other listings and other trawler skills videos. You can click on one of those on the side to watch those. Thank you very much for your thumbs up. We love having you watch our videos. We love putting them together for you and hope you come back again soon.